And we are good to go. Cool. Hello, everybody. Thank you all for watching this video. This is going to be a really great conversation that we'll be having today, this afternoon in Central Time. Before we start, though, I would like to introduce our friend Joel here and guest. Joel, thank you for wanting to come on. If you don't mind just briefly introducing yourself and just maybe how you found the channel.
Oh yeah. Hello, my name's Joel. I found the channel by, trying to find sort of an outlet for sort of wanting to reconnect with, my indigenous heritage. Um, you know, uh, I don't know a whole lot about it, or at least I didn't before until finding your guys' channel and other channels as well. But um, yeah, I mean that's why I'm here. Wanted to reconnect, wanted to talk about things that affect the indigenous community, things that are going on in the world. I think it's a very important topic because I think that's sort of one of the foundational aspects of world culture, and with the world changing so much these days, you know, it's always good to keep that in mind.
Definitely. Thank you, Joel, for that, for the introduction. Yeah, we're happy to have you here. Juan, happy to have you here as well.
Yeah, of
Um,
course.
yeah. And just kind of just go over some updates very quickly. Again, just trying to keep the channel going. Sometimes we get a little bit busy, but again, we try to keep the channel updated with some shorts and videos and whatnot. So again, thank you all subscribers and those that are new tuning in. Hello, but again, thank you for watching our content.
Yeah, thank you for the patience too. But yeah, so channel's growing steadily. We I think ever since I got back here, we've gotten another like 70 subs. So it's like we just got to keep the ball rolling, bro. So
Yeah, definitely. Yep, it's nice to see. But yeah, kind of just to go into this video and this topic at hand, and obviously this is going to be a very, I would say, more difficult topic to maybe conceptualize for a lot of people because, as you can see by the title, it's going to be about the destruction of the indigenous people in the Caribbean islands, the replacement that took place, um, and current life today in terms of what the worldview is of those islands, and again how the history of the indigenous people and the destructions of those societies is not widely discussed in academia, or particularly in the education system, at least here in the United States and across other countries as well.
or
So,
more so, if we wanted to just kind of mention, at least in the Latin American system, it seems that it's glossed over. The Spanish are painted in a disingenuously good light, and any atrocities are minimized or swept under the rug.
oh, definitely. So many atrocities were swept under the rug, Juan. I appreciate you saying that. And I think the reason, and I believe I understand why this is swept under the rug, and we'll look at it first from the Western perspective, is that this puts a part of Western history in bad light, right? Because I believe sometimes we maybe don't understand the history of particularly of smaller countries. Cuba, the Dominican Republic, Haiti, Jamaica, other small Caribbean islands. And I believe many of us in the United States believe that the current populations that are there, particularly those of African descent, maybe we were taught since kids that African people were always there, right? That there was
Or
never.
if not that outright, at least like the implication was that, right? That was like
Mhm.
kind of like the implication.
Correct, that Black Africans always inhabited these islands, and there was nothing that would possibly signify that there was some issue that happened as to why they were there. And I believe it's briefly discussed about within the terms of slavery, right? But there's not much discussions on the original people that were on those islands. So this is what we'll be discussing today.
Yeah.
We'll be talking about sorry, we're going to say something, Juan.
I was just going to say, at least tying into this, at least personally, from whenever I was going through school, like it seemed like the natives were acknowledged in one way, like that Columbus met them, right? And that was it. But nothing else is really said after the fact, and nothing is explained as to why there's not millions of natives there now. So that's never explained. That's never, addressed.
Oh, exactly. And I like those teacups, Juan. It's pretty nice. Gotta go off topic. But yes, it's not addressed. I mean, we're taught about Columbus reaching there, right? And then in some ways, we're told to be proud of Columbus Day, be proud of that history. But there's a certain evil that happened on those islands. That's the unfortunate truth that is not widely discussed as it should be. And that is that there were indigenous people named Taino, Arawak people that lived there on those islands, and they were essentially wiped out. There was millions of native people that were there, again, that were living on what some might call Hispaniola, the Dominican Republic and Haiti first. And essentially what happened was when Columbus's first voyage, when he arrived, he was surprised to see native people there. But the first voyage, and I've read the book a little bit in terms of his recordings and journals, is that there were some introductions, right? There were some brief, I would say, this is who I am. Hello, I'm Columbus, and some Spaniards with me as well. It was, I wouldn't say it was peaceful, but the first voyage was not as terrible. But as more voyages came, Spaniards, the Spanish Empire, realized that the current living situation of the native people could perhaps be easy for them to conquer, right? And what they did was, of course, bring weapons, bring horses, bring a lot of, I guess you would say, armor and supplies that would help them for war. And what they did was, murder the innocent native people that lived on those islands through enslavement, destruction of their homes, and many other terrible atrocities that happened. Those native people that managed to get away were even caught. There was no escape. And I was talking with Juan earlier about this, is that is basically hell that these people were living in. And of course, it's even worse, you could say, for the women on those islands, because they were assaulted, sometimes conceived babies, mixed babies, and then those children are either eliminated or enslaved as well. And that is the unfortunate reality that happened. And that's just the Hispaniola, I would say. On islands such as Jamaica and the other Caribbean islands, it's actually gets even worse, where the people on Haiti, at least, is mostly African American, right? On the island of called Haiti. And then why is that? It's because the destruction was so terrible on that island, is that the replacement was bound to happen, and that is that the Spanish Empire decided to use black African slaves and imported them to those islands, specifically Haiti. And that is why when we look at Haiti today, and maybe we think, oh, this is just how life always was, and there was always black Africans that were there. It's like, no, there's a terrible history that went with that. It wasn't all roses and sunshine. And that's the unfortunate reality on what happened. Now, today, I would say, though, that when we hear the words, like, especially online, sometimes there's fringe groups talk about, oh, great replacement theory, right? Or something really crazy. But I think that's, not only is it just stupid to say, because I think in ways that really far, especially fringe political groups, say that, oh, we're being replaced by immigrants, right? This is a great replacement, and we're being genocided. It's just so stupid. Like,
Yeah.
you don't know what genocide is, first off. Two, you should read up on the actual replacement that happened, right? And again, this is the part where particular countries in the West do not like to be associated with this history. And that is that there was a genocide that took place, and these people are gone, been gone for quite some time. But it's been a history that's been swept under the rugs. I was not taught this in my education system. I'm sure millions of other Americans were not either taught about the atrocities.
It's so bad as far as like the not being taught this and the way it's swept under the rug that, even though I know a genocide happened and I've read the historical sources, proving this, even with regards to my own ancestors, sometimes I almost doubt it because whenever you bring it up to people, they get such a shocked and offended look on their face because they're just flabbergasted. Like, no, you're making it up. But it's like all the historical sources do point to it. And in fact, I believe that they said like the Nazis, when they first came up with the idea of genocide or whatever, they basically had taken notes to what had happened with the natives. And that's why they kind of had a historical example, that kind of thing. But that's what I think is silly is like people, when you say it, people will flinch and their immediate knee-jerk reactions to deny it. Be like, no, you're exaggerating. You're lying. And I think it's just kind of it's kind of pathetic that we're in that stage. It shouldn't be something that's contested because the evidence is overwhelmingly there.
Yeah, absolutely. And, to be fair, I mean, my education system was in the South, the South of the United States. It's not great. And definitely the way that it's portrayed, first of all, the way that it's portrayed is if Columbus like went to the mainland, like somewhere in like Mexico or the United States or something like that. Anything about the islands, I mean, like the first thing you hear about the islands is like the Cuban Missile Crisis in the 60s. There's no talk about the Taino people as a culture, as a people, as if they had never even existed at all, really.
I could see that. I think I think the fact that it was on the islands is like really also swept on the rug. Like they kind of do make it seem pretty American centric. Like he landed in the continental U.S. and that was how they really try to tie it in. Like, and the fact of the matter is people that defend Columbus a lot, like if we get into like the controversy lately with like having a Christopher Columbus Day, right, and Indigenous Peoples Day, and of course the current president put Christopher Columbus Day back, but when it comes to that thing, it's always curious to me how so many Americans get overly defensive on Christopher Columbus when it has nothing to even do with their specific colonial history. Like he was never even part of their colonial structure. This was completely with the Latin Americans. It was completely with Spain. It's kind of silly, but
I think what would be good to kind of put in place in the education system is, okay, maybe teach about what happened to Columbus not what happened, about Columbus coming here, but go more in depth about the destruction and the genocide, perhaps in high school when children are more mature to understand that and analyze it with a better mindset.
yeah.
I would say, though, that just the education system right now does need some work. Because, again, this isn't a widely discussed topic. I think that in at least certain Western countries like Britain, the Netherlands, France, and Spain want to see themselves in good light. And what they did in terms of imperialism, while maybe there are some parts of their history that they might believe that is not the greatest, but I think this particular topic here is something that they really would prefer not to talk about at all, right? And again, it wasn't just Spain that contributed to this elimination. Again, as I mentioned, Britain, France, and a few other nations in the Netherlands and Portugal also partook in this.
Definitely.
Yeah, partook in these islands and the destruction of the Caribbean populations. And I think it should be seen more as a representation. The current islands today should be the representation of what those countries were responsible for, right? I mean, look at the state of them today, right? It's not an extremely well developed place where people are living in joy and prosperity. There's a lot of undeveloped regions, of Haiti. Obviously, Haiti is in an unfortunate condition right now where many of the people live in poverty. There's issues with food, living spaces, so many bad things that I could discuss right now. But I think that may also be attributed to, and this is a topic for another time, is um, the Black Africans that were enslaved on the island fought back against France, against the French plantation owners and the soldiers, and they won miraculously. They succeeded in defeating them. But I think that there is probably some, well, they declared independence, but I believe that there are some trade embargoes and a lot of other things that Western countries put on Haiti as to why it is the way it is today, right? Like I
Right.
believe the United States is a little bit responsible for this as well, because when um, when the Haitians won their independence and beat the French plantation owners, there was a lot of worry and confusion in the Southern American states where what are we going to do about this? I don't think they really much enjoyed seeing these African um, Haitian people be freed, right, and live and declare their own country. That's almost unheard of.
Right. I mean, and
Um,
just for context, guys, because I look it up real fast. Haiti declared independence in 1804. So back then, people were even more racist. They were hella racist back then. So you can only imagine.
they were pretty racist. Yeah, this is true. Um, so thanks for looking that up, Juan. But yeah, so again, the arrival of Columbus. Again, his first voyage was quite brief, but when he notified the Spanish king and queen of land there and people that were there that they believed that they could dominate, again, more voyages took place and things really started to take off in terms of the destruction, just escalated to a point of where it is today. And I think we could probably go into an article about that, which I'm happy to share because, again, it's not widely discussed. One thing I'd like to point out, and Juan, you discuss this as well, is the whole black legend thing. That is a fake excuse for Hispanistas, as they call themselves that, or people that are pro Spanish Empire to say that, what happened on that island isn't true and it's massively exaggerated. Okay, explain why there's no why there's no indigenous people currently, unless they have some slight ancestry of Tainos or other indigenous groups on the island. They're not present. So please explain that with great clarity. Sorry.
100%. I was just going to build on that. One thing in case, to prevent any issues in the comments, I have heard that there are efforts of for Tainos, currently, that there are some small, very small communities that are almost gone, but that there are some people that are I guess closer to half or so. I don't know, something I've heard something up the grapevine like that. But by and large, guys, most people that take a DNA test in these regions, they at the most they might get 15% indigenous DNA. So that just kind of goes to show you how much this genocide happened. Because if it didn't happen, then most of these people should be at least kind of like Mexicans. They should be 50% or something. On average, right? But you don't see that, guys. So that's what I just wanted to point out. And another thing is with the black legend shit, it's just it's just intellectually lazy. I feel like anybody that uses this excuse is because they don't have sources themselves, or their sources that they do have are contradicted by other legitimate scholarly sources. So instead of having an actual discussion about it, they just want to be lazy and they just want to say, well, your sources are invalid because they're critical of Spain, which is not, that's not an argument that you're just giving up. So you lost the argument using that. Or second, they'll say your sources are invalid because it comes from Anglos, which again is weird when they say that, because it's how do you know it's an Anglo-Saxon person that wrote that? That's kind of weird. Nobody even uses Anglo-Saxon, by the way. We don't use that term. Nobody in the U.S. calls themselves Anglo-Saxon. I just think it's kind of weird that they use this rudimentary historical type of label. What are you talking about, bro? Are you saying because they're Americans? That's different. If they're white Americans, but then again, I would say if they're white Americans, they would be the most unbiased because they don't have any stake in the matter. They don't have any personal ancestry or any personal tie. So if anything, I would say Americans would be way more objective looking at this historically than a Spanish person that wants to dress up their own fucking heritage. how about we address that part? But anyways, I just think it's intellectually lazy when they always resort to black legend, or they'll say, oh, because it's an Anglo source, it's therefore invalid. And it's like, that's not an argument, dude. You're just letting us know that you suck at actually doing any critical thinking, but.
Yeah, exactly. And especially, these people wrote personal diaries about this kind of stuff, like what they saw when they first got here, how they were treated by the natives, how they did treat the natives. And it's just like, they kind of just killed a lot of people. There's no other way around it. What do you mean? You want more source than the man himself? Like, what do you want?
Yeah, because even it's even in the actual sources for the Spaniards themselves. Like, we'll get into it in the article, but in the article, like we'll showcase it to you guys later. But it's called Genocide and the Hispanic-American Problem, I believe. But in this one, Genocide and the Hispanic-American Dilemma. So there was a lot of like Franciscan monks or like religious leaders or like Bartolome de las Casas, like different figures that would approach the king and talk about the depopulation problem because the Spaniards were causing this, right? So the Spaniards themselves were stating that they were causing the problem. That's why the king was issuing so many laws to try to prevent this. Although again, we'll get into it, but he contradicted himself a whole lot, or was very ineffective, or he'd like pass law and then undo it with another law later, and kind of, it was never consistent protection. But it's like, the Spaniards themselves do this, but I feel like people that are Hispanista that throw out this shit out is like, they don't have any real understanding of the history. They just have whatever they like to, cape for. They have their little beliefs, and they don't actually look into anything. They just don't like anything that's critical of Spain, even though it's true and it comes from their own sources, but they're unaware of it. And if you show them that this stuff exists, and they'll just simply say, oh no, it's fake. They're just delusional.
Thanks for bringing that up, Juan. Yeah, I think that maybe I should explain who are the Hispanistas in case those that are new. You want to maybe explain? You might be able to explain better than mine. But basically, they're just people of Latin American descent Latin American descent. Well, people that are pro-Spanish Empire, right, or are pro like mestizaje, or pro deeply Hispanic beliefs, where anything that they would see as indigenous is something that's either archaic or backward, or just shouldn't be discussed in Hispanic dialogues.
And a lot of them go so far, maybe not all, but a lot of them go so far as to say that Spain should be in charge again, that the empire should return, and that was the height of glory and things like this. And Spain only brought positive things only, and that they lifted the natives out of, being in the mud and gave them civilization. That's how much they cape for the Spanish Empire, to the point where they throw on blinders when it regards to anything that can even be a small criticism of the Spanish. They refuse to accept it. And a lot of these people, as sad as it is to say, are people that are, have notable amounts of native ancestry. So they're very self-hating people. Some of them are straight up almost fully indigenous, and they still act like this, even though they may have like 5% Spanish DNA. They've been brainwashed so hard, and they're so self-hating that they'll do that.
The brainwashing is intense. It can get to you.
Yeah.
They can get kind of angry too, but
they get very personal, bro. Like, if it's not Black Legend or Anglo, then they're just going to resort to insulting you or something, or they'll call you self-hating, even though that's like projection on their part.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Thanks. One last thing before covering the articles. I think that a country such as Spain, in a way, they may want to be perceived as a country that was once an empire that brought civilization to these lands, these native lands. And we brought Catholicism and all these great things. So what you're saying is putting us in bad light. So we're going to create this black legend crap and say that that's not true, right? When it is true. Like, I think a country that is as religious as Spain does not want to be seen in that sort of portrayal, I would say. I think that that's why perhaps they created the whole black legend. And that's why it's sort of in place today as something to, I don't know, as some sort of like shield or defense for the atrocities that happened. But
I will say like because I looked it up one time because I was curious about this whole black legend, and so they say that the origin of this supposed black legend is that I think this was like way back in the days, a couple centuries ago. The British wanted to portray the Spanish like in Europe as like more barbaric, and so they pointed out to these atrocities that they committed. And they said that there were these like horrible exaggerations, but from what we've looked at as far as the sources, I don't think there's any exaggeration to be had here, man. I mean, it's straight up genocide. I don't know what exaggeration there is. I mean, that's what happened in a lot of cases with the Caribbean islands, not to mention in other parts like in Mexico that did happen. And to my own ancestors, it happened, in a war. But, it's like, does it sound very uncomfortable to listen to? Sure. But I mean, that doesn't negate the fact that it happened at all. So it's not really black legend. It's just that I guess what it happened is like the English just called out that shit, when it was politically advantageous for them to do so. And it's like, but that's the skeletons in Spain's closet. If they hadn't done the things, there wouldn't have been any fucking political fallout from that back during that time period. It's like, but they did do the things,
Yeah, they did. They did. That's absolutely true, Juan. But yeah, I think right now I'm going to go ahead and just share one article that I found was quite interesting. And this was an article by Bartolome. I want to butcher this name. Bartolome de las Casas. And he was a priest. I think he was a priest that was sent to the Caribbean islands. And he was originally a person that held I think it was encomendero, or he held the encomienda at first, and then he realized the bad things that were happening and stopped doing this. So let me go ahead and share that really quick. Okay.
Oh, just to recap, guys, I just looked it up just to recap in case. Bartolome de las Casas was a Franciscan, basically a Franciscan type of priest who is a defender of indigenous rights in the Americas, who was known for writing really powerful statements denouncing the abuses committed by the conquistadors. Essentially, that's who he was.
Thanks, Juan. Yeah. Let me go ahead and share that really quick.
Sounds good.
Can you guys? Sorry, I should have practiced this before. Just 1 second. Share.
No worries.
Article. Thanks. Allow to share window. Okay, so let's switch. Okay, is it showing just the StreamYard, or is it showing the article right now?
It's showing the article right now. Yep.
Okay, sweet. Sweet. Cool. Thank you. So yeah, this is the book document that Bartolome de las Casas wrote, and it was a short account of the destruction of the Indies. And this gets pretty intense. I would say that if you are of native descent and you're trying to learn about your history, this would be a good start, but this is what will probably ignite the fire inside you to where you're very it's very distressing to read about this because of the destruction and the genocide that took place on these islands. So I'll briefly read just maybe a couple paragraphs here. And again, this is a Spanish priest who came to the islands and witnessed these events firsthand, and then he reported about it. So go ahead and read this. As we have said, the island of Hispaniola was the first to witness the arrival of Europeans and the first to suffer the wholesale slaughter of its people and the devastation and depopulation of the land. It all began with the Europeans taking native women and children both as servants and to satisfy their own base appetites. Then, not content with the local people offered them of their own free will, and all offered as much as they could spare. They started taking for themselves the food the natives contrived to produce by the sweat of their brows, which was in all honesty little enough, since what a European will consume in a single day normally supports 3 native households of 10 persons, each for a whole month. And since the newcomers began to subject the locals to other vexations, assaults, and iniquities, the people began to realize that these men could not, in truth, have descended from the heavens. Some of them started to conceal what food they had. Others decided to send their women and children into hiding, and yet others took to the hills to get away from the brutal and ruthless cruelty that was being inflicted on them. The Christians punched them, boxed their ears, and flogged them in order to track down the local leaders. And whole shameful process came to a head when one of the European commanders raped the wife of the paramount chief of the entire island. It was then the local it was then that the locals began to think of ways of driving the Europeans out of their lands and to take up arms against them. Their weapons, however, were flimsy and ineffective, both in attack and defense. And indeed, war in the Americas is no more deadly than jousting or than many Europeans' children's games. And sorry, let me just get that over there. And with their horses and swords and lances, the Spaniards easily fended them off, killing them and committing all kinds of atrocities against them. They forced their way into native settlements, slaughtering everyone they found there, including small children, old men, pregnant women, and women who had just given birth. They hacked them into pieces, slicing open their bellies with their swords as though they were so many sheep herded into a pen. They even laid wagers on whether they could manage to slice a man in two at a stroke, or cut an individual's head from his body, or disembowel him with a single blow of their axes. They grabbed suckling infants by the feet and, ripping them from their mother's breast, dashed them headlong against the rocks, others laughing and joking, all while threw them over their shoulders into a river, shouting, "Wriggle, you little perisher." They slaughtered anyone and everyone in their path, on occasion running through a mother and her baby with a single thrust of their swords. Again, it's pretty terrible. They spared no one, erecting especially wide giblets on which they could string their victims up with their feet just off the ground and then burn them alive, 13 at a time, in honor of our Savior and the 12 apostles, or tie dry straw to their bodies and set it on fire. Some they choose to keep alive and simply cut their wrists, leaving their hands dangling, saying to them, "Take this letter," meaning that their sorry condition would act as a warning to those hiding in the hills. The way they normally dealt with native leaders and nobles was to tie them to a kind of griddle consisting of sticks resting on pitchforks driven into the ground, and then grill them over a slow fire. With the result, they howled in agony and despair as they died a lingering death. So, yeah, as you can see, that was pretty morbid. Let me go ahead and unshare that. So, yeah, that's probably one of the most difficult articles of documents I've read, of any books I've read in my life. That's really bad. And even after reading it, like, I'm still in like some shock, like how people can be that terrible to other human beings. But this is why it's not widely discussed, right? This is why those atrocities that took place is, again, as we mentioned, best kept under the rug. If you're a civilization that wants to perceive themselves as in good faith and in good light, that you brought civilization to others with religion and faith and our own inventions, I think we will try to ensure that nothing negative about us, at least in that extreme, is let out, or we'll just cover it up with black legend. So, yeah, again, to those that are just reading about that, that is what the article is about: is the destruction, genocide, everything else that took place, and then the eventual replacement, which is why those islands are how they are today.
And one thing I just can't get over is like, I don't understand how anybody can read that or be aware of that history and still be an Hispanista or still be very pro Spain, or how they can try to excuse that. There's no excusing any of that. And I find people that try to maybe let's say they knew about it, that they're very contradictory. Like they're very intellectually inconsistent. Because if somebody were to say, well, hey man, that's just part of the conquest, right? You know, you can't judge things based off your 20th century standards or whatever the fuck, 21st century standards. But even back then, that was against their moral ethics. Like, where the fuck could you have just gone and like in Europe and just killed a bunch of people like that, and then you wouldn't have gotten arrested for that? Nowhere. Like they still had laws, bro. Like you couldn't just go around killing everybody or doing whatever you wanted. Like there would have been retribution, and also their own standard of ethics preceding them by 1,500 years stated that this was wrong, which is the Christian Bible. If you say that the Christian Bible is real and everything in there is valid, then everything in that Bible would have said that what they were doing was unjust. So why do you think the priests were complaining to the Spanish king, stating that they were depopulating the islands and committing all these atrocities, and like telling the king that he needed to pass laws to protect these people? You know, so that whole argument just makes no sense. It's like, by Christian standards that predated the atrocities 1,500 years, they still failed. So like it has nothing to do with us looking back in history and being overly critical. No, like it's like even back then that shit was like fucking horrendous. There is no excuse, and if you try to excuse it, I have to question if you're actually a good person. You know. Oh, sorry, Marcus. You got me.
Thank you. No, I was going to say I would question if they're even Christian at all.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't really be an actual Christian and excuse that. Like that, there's no way you can. Like you're just lying. You're LARPing. They like to say everybody else is LARPing. Yeah, you're LARPing as a Christian. There you go.
You know what I think is sad, and I mentioned this before, is that like we're the only ethnic group of people that have these like Hispanistas, or like say that the destruction of basically our people was a good thing in a way, right? To civilize us. I don't know of a single group of people on earth that think this way. I'm going to be very honest. I've been all around the world, and I've yet to meet people that think in that extreme.
Right. Yeah. No, because it's completely silly. I'm just saying, like, the way they talk about, like, some of these people, the way they talk about this is like, I believe that in India, right, they have these islands that have been like remain basically almost uncontacted, or they're very secluded from the rest of the world, right? And so there's been people, Christian missionaries, that have tried to go and they've gotten killed by these people by bows and arrows, right? So the Indian government or the local governments have passed laws preventing people from going to those islands in order to protect them, right? So like it's almost like if these people were logically consistent, then I think that they would be the type that would say like, oh no, like what would be civilizing these people is going in with a bunch of SWAT teams and like mowing them down and then forcing them to convert like at gunpoint. Like, but nobody in the world, everybody in the world would denounce that as completely barbaric. Like the UN would step in, or like the US would send troops or something. You know what I mean? Like nobody would say that that's a just thing. So, but that's how they act with the natives. Like doing that exact thing was somehow justified because of like progress. Like that makes no sense, especially because progress could have been achieved through so many other means. You don't need conquest for progress. Did did China come to Europe and conquer all of Europe to bring them progress with gunpowder and all this other bullshit? No, it was through trade. You know, so it makes no sense. Like some of these people like act like, you know, it's mutually like it's like not mutually exclusive like progress and conquest. It has to be both. It has to be conquest for the progress. Like, no, you don't need conquest for progress. That's stupid ass thinking.
Yeah, you bring up a good point, and that is that like, hey, that didn't have to happen, you know.
No.
If the Spanish Empire at the time would have been a little bit more civilized and not done that, then perhaps these people, innocent people, would have survived, right?
Yeah.
But of course, that's not the case. And you know, the thing that I see, and it's not just from Hispanistas, but others that want to make the Christopher Columbus Day something that's in positive and good light, is that, oh, Native people were conquering others, you know, long before, you know, Spain got there. And they were committing all sorts of things. And I was like, okay, show me a recording of history where Native people eliminated entire populations of other Native people or any other race of people on islands, and then replace them, because there weren't any left, with Black Africans. and brought them over as slaves, and then also settled themselves there as well.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. Like they take what was like honestly low scale wars, right? Skirmishes, a couple hundred people, maybe a couple thousand people, maybe perishing, but mostly it was just like low casualty wars with some captures, like some ransoms. They compare that to the killing of millions of people, because of the imposed conditions the Spanish had, or like the outright like slaughter. Like how are those two comparable in any fucking way? It's just not. And they also, like I said, I always hate these types of arguments because they like, you have these people that were objectively very evil considering everything that they did, right? And they'll be like, well, these people are super evil. Like, you're saying these people are super evil, but like the natives, they're not perfect angels, so therefore they deserved it. And it's like, that makes no sense, dude. Like that literally makes no fucking sense. That's like saying, like, I don't know, somebody that's like saying fucking, I don't know, I'm just trying to make a loose comparison. But it's just like, okay, I got into a fight in middle school, or I beat somebody up, right? Because for whatever reason, right? So then somebody else came and murdered me, and then justifying the murder based off because, like, well, Juan, you weren't perfect all your life. You got into a fight in middle school or whatever. How does that make any fucking sense? Like, it's just stupid. It's not actual thinking.
I'd like to ask some of these people that may consider themselves Christian if they think that Columbus or any of his Spanish allies are in heaven right now or went to heaven. I bet they'd probably think that they are in heaven or that they went to heaven after death. So that's sort of like the that shows you the backwards and flawed thinking of some of these individuals that go about saying that, oh, natives were sacrificing each other. Or like you see like really stupid memes of like some Spaniard in a picture saying, oh, that the native the destruction. Well, not the native. The what's it called thing? My mind is drawing a blank right now. But the native sacrifice must stop, right? And it shows like a Spaniard all like beefed up and everything, making it seem like he was heroic and stopping something that it's such blatant propaganda and lies that is widely pushed on X, on Facebook, and on Instagram.
It's also just it's just completely illogical though. Like I never understand this. It's like, okay, so a small tribe in central Mexico, small I say because in comparison to the millions of natives that were around the Americas, right? Very small in comparison to that total population figure. So one small tribe was maybe conducting some sacrifice, not out of pure evil, by the way. They thought that they had to do it under their religious worldview because they thought the world would end, right? So it wasn't like some sort of like, we're just doing this because we like killing people and ha ha ha. Like that's what they make it seem like. That's not how it was. So because this one small tribe did that, therefore everybody deserved to be enslaved, invaded, colonized, conquered, and fucked up with. Like that makes no sense. That's like, again, if we take an inverse situation, that's like saying, well, because in Europe, in Spain, like they killed tens of thousands of Jews. Therefore, like hypothetically in this scenario, if China had landed, and brought in like hundreds of thousands of troops and like slaughtered and enslaved and raped all these women and completely destroyed the Spanish Empire, that would have been justified because they killed a couple of Jews. How does that make sense, bro? It's like, it makes no sense. You can't excuse one bad thing with a bunch of other shit like times 100 that's worse. That makes no sense.
No, it really doesn't make sense.
But that's what all their arguments boiled out to. It is literally like, oh, well, since some people like committed a couple crimes, you have to punish the entire race of people, and like that's all justified. It makes no fucking sense, bro.
It really doesn't. And it's sad because I think that's something that continues to get pushed, what we see in social media today, and by big time influencers that are pro, I don't know, conquest or pro Western civilization, right? Where they believe that, quote of my friend, their shit doesn't stink.
100%. I'm just saying, if they wanted like a hero's tale, dude, the I guess the hero, I don't think any of this was needed, but if there would have been a hero's tale, like they're actually heroes, right? It would have been, they showed up, they saw some sacrifices, they're like, okay, we're gonna help these natives like topple the empire. They would have toppled the empire, and then they would have fucked off. And they would have just came back and traded as they saw fit with the natives. They would have exchanged shit, and then they would have just fucked off for good. That would have been heroes, I guess, if you wanted to call it that. But that's not what happened.
No, and I believe the Canary Islands, which are islands off the coast of North Africa, is a very good. Is very analogous to what happened in the Caribbean islands, and that is before Spain settled off to the Americas. Right, they had reached the Canary Islands, not very far from Spain, really, and they enacted the same sort of destruction and replacement in a way. Uh, there were, I think, there were Barber, just Arab, some sort of Arab peoples that were living on those islands, and they didn't have the weaponry and defenses to fight off Spain, and they were destroyed and then replaced into what that island is today. And now it's a part of Spain, even though it's off the coast of Africa. Um, I think the U.S. should, when the United States beat Spain in war, they should have had them relinquish those territories as well. Honestly, um, because when Spain lost their war to the U.S., we had them relinquish all territories. So that's why the Philippines was free, right? Well, they were free for a little bit, and then they fell under American jurisdiction. Again, topic for another time.
Right.
But yeah, Juan, I appreciate you sharing that because yeah, it's just a lot of untold history that should be brought to light. It should be
100%. I
changed.
mean, I'm glad we make videos like this. I will continue to make more. Just for the viewers, just so they know, I ordered American Holocaust. It'll get to me by like December 10th. I'm going to read the whole thing. I'll probably make a lot of different videos on it. I think this has to be mainstream. Like, this shouldn't be something that's really debated anymore. This should be fucking accepted for what it is, you know? But it just makes a lot of people uncomfortable. It's just what I've noticed. Both Americans, or if you bring it up to like Latin Americans, they immediately go on the defensive for like Spain or whatever. They won't accept it. Some other people will, but it's just silly. But as far as like these arguments, guys, like the reason why we address this in this video is not that we're trying to like obsess over Hispanistas. That's not it. I'm just saying that this is the main group of people that oppose like the truth historically. And these are like the logical. I say logical. They're not logical at all. But these are the backwards ass arguments that make. And so that's why I keep making these comparisons, because like when you examine any of these things, it just doesn't hold up to any logical analysis.
It really doesn't. It's really backwards. I don't think they realize how backward it is. To be honest,
like whenever they make these arguments, they sound like they're 85 IQ or something, dude.
No, man, that's being nice. I'd say like 50, maybe 40.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, thanks, Joel. We're going to say something.
Yeah, so you want to add anything, man?
Oh, no. I mean, as far as like how empires kind of work, I mean, throughout history, especially in the Western context, you know, a lot of those sort of machinations of like domination are taken like some of the first concentration camps that ever happened were actually under the British. A lot of people think that concentration camps happened under the
the Nazis.
Yeah, under the Nazis. Yeah, man. Dude, I'm so sorry. It's so hard to talk, dude.
Oh, no, no worries.
No worries, Joel.
No worries at all, man.
No worries at all. You're doing good.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's right. I believe like when the Nazis were committing their atrocities to the Jewish people, they borrowed a lot of what they learned from what, was happening in the Americas, what happened in the United States in terms of how Native people were treated.
But yeah, Joe, I was going to say, like, your bit, I didn't know that the British had done it before the Nazis. I didn't know that. I guess I never thought about where the concentration camp idea came from, but I never thought it had kind of predated that specifically.
Yeah, definitely. The Nazis also wanted to do the same thing in Eastern Europe, you know. That's why they invaded the Soviet Union in the first place, was Hitler wanted to, kill off a portion of the population and enslave the other portion of the population in Eastern Europe. All of these things just sort of build up in the Western history, and part of that history is definitely within the Americas.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, he was on a roll in terms of what he wanted to do, entering Russia, and he wanted to eliminate the Slav people that he considered subhuman and not, blonde hair, blue eyes, white, right?
Right.
He wanted to eliminate them and then free up space for more Germans, ethnic Germans, Austrian people to move to and then settle there. Like he was pretty bad. He was pretty terrible. Fortunately, he was beat, so he's gone.
100%.
But yeah, I think we want to share one other article. I think.
Yeah, of course. Before this gets overly long, but
Sure,
it's
yeah,
all good.
yeah.
Let me see if I can share it myself here.
Okay, thanks. Maybe it's better you share because mine is still getting used to it. New laptop and everything.
Yeah, no, it's all good, bro. Let me see. Can you see it? Let me. Or you'll have to add it.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah. Let me do that real quick. Add to the stage.
Okay, great. So this was one article that Marcus found. Marcus is a goat, so it's called Genocide and the Hispanic-American Dilemma. So this one's really, really good, guys. It really goes into depth about the entire affair with the, Caribbean islands and the depopulation part. But let me bring you guys to this point I wanted to make. It's on page 14. It's really, really good here. Okay. So I'll read this part out. Okay. This was clear enough not only to the more prominent 16th century critics such as Las Casas, Gonzalo Fernández de Oviedo, or Alonso de Zorrita, but also the less well-known observers such as the delegates to the Third Provincial Council of the Mexican Church, who warned the king about the imminent danger of Indian extinction. So look, right here, this is back then, they're already warning about this shit, right? Which would lay waste to the colonial territories and put an end to the crown's hopes for great wealth and prestige. The reason why the crown kept, what would happen, from reading this article is that the crown would pass some protections, but the king was really fickle because he needed money for his empire. So he would, stroke a law into place, but then add an exemption. And this exemption would basically destroy the entire law in the first place. So it was just stupid ass legislating, but it's because he was caring more about getting money than protecting, the rights of the indigenous people or listening to the church. And so that's why we see this whole problem. So, but they were also because of these exemptions, it was causing, extinction, like what they were warning, right? So it's a double-edged sword. So now let's look at this. Right here's the most important part. What seems even more convincing, however, is that the fact that none of the 6,447 laws included in the 1681 compilation, more than 60% of which were enacted in the 16th century, made any mention of pestilencias or pestes or epidemics, or contain any guidelines about dealing with outbreaks of such contagious diseases. If the laws contain no references to epidemics, it is not unreasonable to expect that at least some of the thousands of the most prominent Cédulas Reales royal decrees would deal with diseases. But my analysis of more than 1,000 such commands from the years 1500 to 1650, so this is the time period that's the most crucial, right, reveals that almost none of them did so. The word enfermedades or diseases rarely appears, and when it does, it is not in the sense of epidemics, but as part of a general demand addressed to the colonial authorities or the Spanish encomenderos, beneficiaries, to treat the natives well, bring them into the bosom of Christianity, and provide them with food and clothing and a cure for their diseases. The kings and their councils were aware of the spread of epidemics, since this information was regularly reported by colonial officials, visitors, and clergy. Yet, contrary to their active involvement in coping with plagues that erupted in Spain during the same time period, they showed no similar apprehension about this matter in America. So this is what I'm saying, guys. If anybody wanted to, come in and say, well, they were, their limited of this shit was really rudimentary back then. They didn't know shit about plagues. That's completely disproven by the fact that they had plagues in Spain and they had measures for it, right? So what worried the monarchs more than the diseases was the vicious behavior of the Spanish settlers, castes, and officials towards the Indians. The complaints lodged by Spanish monarchs were not isolated comments, but rather a long-standing criticism of Spanish behavior, which cited enslavement, extortion, intimidation, human trafficking, invasion, displacement, and the disruption of normal life, exhaustion, as well as rape, threats, violence, and death. The following Cédula Royal Command of February 1577 addressed to the Audiencia High Court of Quinto is one example. Because of the excessive work and abuse that the Spaniards, have done and still do to the Indians, many of them have died. The Cédulas Royal Command stated time and again that the Indians, were running out, se han acabando, as a result of the Spaniards. So this is what I'm saying. This right here, I think, is a slam dunk. It's very obvious. They're talking about the 6,000 fucking laws, right? They're not even talking about the diseases. So a lot of people that say, well, the diseases caused the extermination. So really, the Spanish, they're innocent. They're innocent little angels. It was the disease. It was God or something, right? That's not true, because they don't have any measures in here trying to control the spread of epidemics. They don't even mention that as a concern. What they mention as a concern thousands of times over. That's why these fucking laws exist, is because of Spanish people's own fucking barbarism, guys. So, like, you know, I just think that's a slam dunk right here. Out of 6,400 whatever fucking laws, they're not even talking about diseases, bro. You know? You would think that would be a thing, right? Like, if the disease was a huge thing, at least some of these would just be like, oh, holy fuck, guys, like, our workforce is so fucking sick. We're losing 80% of our workforce because of diseases. Holy shit. We got to protect them. We got to put in some measures. None of that's mentioned. So it's because that's not what was causing the depopulation. It was the Spaniards' actions. That's what was causing it.
Yep, that's right. The encomiendas, the work on the haciendas, destruction, just the complete arrogance of the Spaniards. The Spaniards. I'm tired of people saying, "Oh, it's just the conquistadors of this." No, like, do you think that the settlers that came there were just like, "Hey, natives are our friends," right? Like, no, they had the same freaking mindset. I'm done playing that game. The settlers are also just as responsible as the conquistadors that came there. None of them are really probably innocent, if I'm being very honest with you. So yeah, that's.
And like the article, what it explains is that, you know, what caused this is like the horrible treatment. There was actual hunting down of the natives and all that, but it's just the horrible treatment. So like, you already racked through, your population's already racked through with some epidemics, right? The initial clash of diseases, let's say, that kills some people. Then you lose all control of your resources, your way of life, and you're forced to live like a slave in horrible conditions. Like, that's what caused most of the deaths, bro. Like, it's just the artificial conditions the Spanish caused. So it's like they are responsible for it. That's just, there is no debate on that.
I think if there's any solace to this, it's the fact that is when a lot of natives were taken on ships to go to Spain for an even worse fate, worse than death. A lot of those ships didn't make it. So at least the Spaniards that were taking them there perished as well.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of slave ships that natives were put on and then sent over there. Some, unfortunately, were subjected to that treatment when they landed in Spain, but many of them did not. I mean, it's terrible that the native people died, of course. But yeah, Juan, this was great that you shared. I appreciate you. Well, I appreciate you pinpointing this part of the article that I brought to you, because I think this really shows just the overall little care that was taken in terms of how Native people should be treated, right? And it was their own doing as to why this happened. Again, it goes back to thinking that this group of people are irreplaceable, right? Or that we have such a surplus of bodies that who cares, right? If they die off, like, we'll bring in more. And that's why the coast of Venezuela was raided multiple times by Spanish ships, is because there were natives there. I'm sure.
They were running out. The article mentions that they were running out of natives, so they had to resort to other stuff. I was gonna say one more thing I wanted to call attention to is this part. I scrolled up, guys, but it's you know how they, like, most Americans say, like, okay, it's the diseases that cause everything. That's what caused everything, right? Well, that's because in 1956 and 1962, some scholars were like basically stating that this was what caused a huge problem, but it didn't even take that long after for there to be refutations, because it says later by other scholars, and it lists all of them, right? Parallel revisionist interpretation started as early as the 1960s. So it was already just a few years after those initial publications, people were challenging that bullshit, right? But they were stating right here, they reject this claim. In their view, the extremely harsh living conditions, ethnic dehumanization, cultural annihilation, the state of living under constant threats, endless moves from one ecological region to another, and hunger and despair were the main causes for the demise of the native population. So even scholars right after that, like I said, it just seems like the scholars that initially published it blaming the diseases, I feel like that's what was accepted because that was what was socially probably the best answer, not the other shit that the other scholars were saying.
This is why I can't see how you can, people that like argue against this, right? Argue in favor of, the settlers and the destruction, can call themselves Christian or Catholic people in good faith and not acknowledge the destruction, right? They work these people. The Spaniards work them like dogs, right? Even worse than dogs. They didn't even treat them as animals. And yeah, this is just one example. You know, like we could cover many, many other things that the Spanish are responsible for across the Americas, but I would say that the Caribbean is probably the worst.
It's got to be the worst because I mean, like, I just basically, I don't know, like almost the utter annihilation. Like I'm aware that there are some people, maybe like we're talking about like very low population, less than 1,000, maybe still exists there, right? Like that are more native, and like that people still have native ancestry. But for all intents and purposes, right, without like stating that doesn't exist, 99% were wiped out, man. I mean,
You got to address the elephant in the room. That's the
yeah, I mean,
truth. I respect those people that have native ancestry that don't fall into this paradigm. You know, I respect those that are trying to learn more about their history, right? And maybe see themselves as native, right? That's native descendants. But for all intents and purposes, you're right, Juan. You know, this is the truth. This is the unfortunate reality that we say, and it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable that what happened isn't as discussed because I think this is the stain that is that is always like trying to be scrubbed from those that consider themselves like proud, like uh, he's how should I say, yeah, Western historians, right? Like a lot of them don't talk about this in detail um, because it's so terrible. I really wanted to discuss, or not discuss, but like I was really more curious about how this is more perceived across the Americas. And that's also what I wanted to talk about today, but I don't have that research in hand. Um, that may be a good topic for another time. But yeah, it's just yeah, unfortunate of everything that's happened, how it's not covered in more light. But maybe we'll see more people waking up to this and seeing what can be done. So yeah. Aside from that, I think we are right at an hour and 2 minutes. And according to the script, I think we covered everything. So
yeah,
it's
I
pretty
think so.
good.
Think so. We can always cover more of this type of stuff, future videos. So
Yeah, definitely. Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
But this was a good topic. I'm glad, Joel, I appreciate you coming on.
definitely.
Um, Juan, it's good discussing this as well. And to those that, again, I think we'll put this to a close here, but definitely if to those that are watching this video, if you have any questions about it or want to bring up any topics, feel free to leave a comment. If you enjoyed the video, you can leave a like. If you didn't, then tell us why you didn't. Be curious. Reveal yourselves. Hispanistas. I'm kidding.
Yeah, I mean, if you're an Hispanista, I mean, just go fuck yourself.
Or that. Um, but yeah, I think we will end this recording. But again, thank you to all that watched, those that are subscribed. If you enjoyed, just tell your friends and let more people know because not many people talk about this. And we're one of the few channels to do. So at that end, I will bid you all farewell. See you guys.